The city street was alive with movement, cars and buses humming along their routes, people walking quickly to their destinations, and the occasional bicycle weaving between the crowd. The sun was high, casting bright light over the sidewalks and buildings, making the pavement warm beneath everyone's shoes. Among the flow of people, a young woman moved carefully, balancing her bag on one shoulder and her books in her hands. She had just finished classes for the day and was eager to get home. Her headphones were in, the soft hum of music filling her ears and creating a sense of calm around her. The city could be chaotic, but in that moment, she felt a small bubble of peace. As she walked down the street, she noticed the usual mix of faces around her. Some people were chatting on their phones, some laughing with friends, and some hurrying along lost in their own worlds. The aroma of street food drifted through the air from a nearby vendor, mingling with the faint scent of exhaust from passing vehicles. She adjusted her bag and focused on her path, weaving carefully through the crowd, paying little attention to the noise around her. But then a low roar of engines reached her ears, pulling her attention upward. Turning her head slightly, she saw a group of bikers approaching, the sound of their motorcycles echoing off the buildings. They moved in a loose formation, taking up more space on the road than they should, and the scent of gasoline mixed with leather filled the air. Among them, one biker caught her eye. He rode with an easy arrogance, his posture relaxed but confident, a smirk playing on his lips. His black jacket gleamed under the sun, and the silver of his bike reflected the city light. There was something about the way he moved, almost daring anyone to challenge him. He slowed as he got closer, noticing her for the first time. His eyes lingered in a way that made her uneasy, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to focus on the music in her ears, hoping to tune him out, but the sound of his laugh broke through her bubble of calm. He slowed to a stop near her, revving the engine slightly, making the vibration travel through the pavement. The other bikers behind him glanced at her, but they didn't move. They were part of his circle, watching silently, giving him the stage he seemed to demand. She stepped to the side, hoping to continue on her path without drawing attention, but he blocked her way with his bike. His smirk widened as he leaned slightly to one side, looking down at her with an air of mockery. She felt a mix of fear and frustration, unsure how to handle the situation without provoking him further. The crowd around them began to notice, glancing over and whispering among themselves, sensing tension in the air. Some stopped to watch, curious but hesitant to get involved. The city seemed to pause for a moment, the flow of people and cars slowing as attention turned toward the scene. The biker spoke, his voice loud and confident. He made a comment, teasing and mocking her in a way that made her stomach tighten. She swallowed hard and tried to ignore him, stepping slightly backward. Her instincts told her to keep calm and not escalate the situation, but every word he spoke pushed her patience closer to its limit. He laughed again, a deep sound that drew more attention, enjoying the discomfort he was creating. The other bikers chuckled quietly, encouraging him without saying a word. It felt like a performance, and she was unwillingly cast in the role he wanted her to play. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had learned to stay composed in stressful situations, and now she focused on keeping her voice steady, even though it trembled slightly. She attempted to speak, asking him to move aside, to let her pass, but her words seemed to amuse him further. He leaned on his bike casually, looking down at her with a mix of disbelief and mockery, as if the idea that someone could challenge him was laughable. She realized that reasoning with him might not work, that words alone would not change his behavior. The crowd was growing slightly, people stopping and watching, but there was no one stepping in yet. She could feel their eyes, the tension thickening. She hated feeling exposed, vulnerable, but she knew that panicking would only make things worse. She adjusted her bag again, keeping her stance steady, ready to react if needed. Her mind raced, thinking of ways to safely remove herself from the situation, but the biker seemed to anticipate every move, blocking her subtly without overt aggression. The moment stretched longer than it should have, each second heavy with unspoken challenge. The biker pulled out his phone, aiming to record her reaction. She felt her anxiety spike, realizing that this was no longer just a personal confrontation. He intended to humiliate her publicly. The thought of strangers seeing her moment of fear made her cheeks burn, but she refused to show him the satisfaction. She stood tall, forcing herself to breathe evenly, ignoring the small tremor in her hands. The other bikers remained silent, giving him silent approval. It was a strange kind of group dynamic, one person acting boldly while the others watched, lending strength through mere presence. She noted it silently, understanding that her challenge would be not just to him but to the collective energy of the group. The street felt smaller, the surrounding noise fading into the background as the tension grew between them. Passers-by continued their walks, some glancing nervously, others stopping fully to witness the unfolding scene. She felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't let him control the situation completely. Her eyes met his, steadying her gaze despite the fear curling inside her. She realized that confidence mattered more than size or bravado in this moment. While she had been hoping to just walk away, she now understood that she needed to hold her ground, if only to show herself that she could withstand his intimidation. The biker's smirk faltered slightly, sensing the change in her demeanor. His eyes narrowed, trying to reassess the situation. She could see the flicker of uncertainty, small but present. The moment was delicate, balanced on a knife's edge between continued harassment and some unknown outcome. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm, aware that any sudden move could provoke him further. The air felt thick, heavy with tension, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a car honked in the distance, drawing attention away momentarily. The biker turned his head briefly, annoyed, giving her a small opening. She considered making a move to step past him, but he noticed immediately, leaning slightly forward to block her path again. She felt a mix of relief and frustration, recognizing that the confrontation was far from over. Every instinct told her to stay alert, to think 2 steps ahead, to prepare for whatever might come next. Pedestrians whispered among themselves, some expressing silent disapproval, others offering averted glances. The city's energy was a strange mix of indifference and curiosity, and she felt the weight of it pressing down on her. She wished someone would intervene, someone with authority or courage, but for now she was alone. She realized that the situation depended on her ability to maintain composure, to not give him the power he sought. Minutes stretched on, though it felt like hours. She shifted her weight slightly, adjusting her stance, ready for any sudden movement. The biker's phone was still raised, aiming to capture her reactions, and she kept her face neutral, refusing to give him satisfaction. The sound of engines and city noise seemed distant now, as if the confrontation existed in its own world, separate from the normal rhythm of the street. In that moment, she found a quiet strength within herself. She could feel her fear, but it was tempered by a rising sense of determination. She knew she couldn't predict what the biker might do next, but she could control her own reactions. Every breath, every careful movement was a statement that she refused to be cowed, that she refused to allow cruelty to dictate her actions. The biker, noticing the change, paused briefly. His smirk returned, though now tinged with a hint of uncertainty. He had been expecting easy fear, a quick display of submission, but her calm defiance was unexpected. For the first time, he seemed to hesitate, questioning whether he had misjudged the situation. The other bikers shifted subtly, sensing the tension, but still remaining in their silent roles, observing and waiting. As the young woman stood there holding her ground, she became aware of the subtle rhythm of the street once more. Cars moved past, pedestrians resumed their walks, the hum of the city continuing around her. Yet the space between her and the biker remained charged, a small battlefield of wills. She felt the weight of eyes upon her, but also a strange sense of clarity. This was a moment she would remember, not for the fear or the confrontation, but for the strength she had found in herself. The biker adjusted his posture again, sensing that the easy target he had expected was no longer there. He muttered something under his breath, a mixture of annoyance and surprise, as if realizing that intimidation was not always as simple as it seemed. The young woman held her stance, breathing steadily, her mind alert to every subtle movement, ready for what might come next. The street around them was busy, yet this small scene had become its own story, a confrontation between arrogance and quiet resilience. And in that moment, the city seemed to pause, holding its breath with her, waiting to see who would make the next move. The young woman's heart was still racing as she faced the biker. His eyes, sharp and mocking, watched her like a predator studying its prey. The crowd nearby shifted uneasily, murmuring quietly among themselves. Some were curious, some were worried, but no one stepped forward. The biker's arrogance seemed unshakable, Yet she noticed tiny cracks in his confidence, small hesitations as he tried to predict her reaction. He stepped closer, letting the roar of his bike vibrate through the pavement. The engine's hum was low and threatening, a reminder of the power he assumed he had. His voice cut through the air, loud and confident. He mocked her, taunting her for being alone and unprepared, his words sharp enough to make anyone falter. But she refused to react immediately. Instead, she breathed deeply, grounding herself, focusing on remaining steady despite the fear curling in her chest. The girl tried to reason, her voice calm but trembling slightly. She asked him to move aside to allow her to continue her walk. Her words seemed like a fragile barrier against the biker's growing boldness. He laughed, a sound that made her stomach tighten, dismissing her plea with a wave of his hand. He leaned against his bike, smirking, as if she were an inconvenience rather than a person. The other bikers stood behind him, silent but supportive, their presence lending him confidence. Time seemed to slow. Pedestrians glanced back, some lingering to watch the scene unfold. A man with a briefcase stopped in his tracks, sensing danger but unsure if he should intervene. An elderly woman crossing the street held her grandson's hand tightly, eyes fixed on the confrontation. The street, full of life moments before, had become a stage where tension replaced normal motion. The young woman felt the weight of all those eyes, a mix of fear, frustration, and determination pressing down on her. The biker moved with a fluid arrogance, testing her patience. He nudged her slightly with his elbow, a careless shove that was meant to intimidate. The girl stumbled backward, steadying herself quickly, her mind racing. She had learned to act with caution in dangerous moments, and she now calculated each step. She could sense the crowd's unease, and it gave her a small spark of courage. They might not act, but at least they were witnesses. She was not invisible. The biker pulled out his phone, holding it up as though he were capturing her reactions for an audience. Her anxiety spiked. The thought of being humiliated publicly was almost worse than the immediate threat. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain composed. Her eyes met his, steady and unyielding, signaling that she would not give him the satisfaction of fear. Every second felt like an eternity, every small gesture amplified in the charged air between them. The young woman noticed the small details, the slight tension in his jaw, the flicker of uncertainty when she didn't respond with panic, the way his friends shifted slightly as if sensing the mood change. She realized that her calm defiance was affecting him. The biker, used to control and submission, had not expected someone to stand still and meet his challenge without flinching. He seemed slightly off balance, trying to maintain authority, but the moment revealed that even arrogance could be fragile. Her mind raced with options, thinking of ways to safely remove herself from the situation. She knew that reacting aggressively might escalate matters, but doing nothing could allow the situation to worsen. She weighed each possible move, from carefully stepping aside to speaking louder and drawing attention, considering the risks and potential outcomes. The biker watched her every action, assuming she would make a mistake, but she remained deliberate and composed. The air was thick with tension as the biker stepped closer, attempting to reassert dominance. His smirk widened and his voice grew louder, mocking and taunting. He leaned slightly toward her, invading her space, confident that his size and presence would intimidate her. But the girl stood firm, her stance steady, her breathing controlled. She refused to let his show of strength dictate her response. The crowd, sensing the confrontation, began to whisper. Some people murmured words of support, while others simply observed in curiosity or fear. The young woman felt a strange combination of isolation and solidarity. She was alone in action, but the presence of witnesses created an invisible safety net. The biker, however, seemed undeterred. He was used to attention, used to people watching him dominate, and he assumed the crowd's silence was permission to continue. Minutes passed with this tense balance, a silent war of wills. The girl's pulse raced, but she focused on steadying it, refusing to let fear control her. She noticed the subtle shifts in the biker's posture, the tiny signs that his arrogance was not as absolute as it appeared. The smirk occasionally faltered, the mocking tone softened ever so slightly, as if he sensed the unpredictability of her resolve. She began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear, but the control of it. Each step she took, each calm breath, was a quiet statement that she would not be manipulated. The biker's phone remained raised, a tool for humiliation, but she ignored it, focusing instead on the immediate physical space. On the way, she could navigate safely through the danger. Suddenly, a car honked sharply nearby, breaking the intensity for a brief moment. The biker turned his head, annoyed, giving her a tiny opening. She considered stepping past him quickly, but hesitated, aware that any sudden movement might trigger a reaction. The city's normal rhythm continued around them. Cars moving, people walking, the hum of engines and chatter filling the background. But the tension between her and the biker remained concentrated in that small space. The biker nudged her again, this time with a deliberate push, testing her reaction. She stumbled slightly but did not fall, keeping her stance grounded. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, loud and insistent, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. Her focus sharpened, each sense attuned to his movements, ready to respond if necessary. The young woman began to feel a quiet determination rising within her. She had faced challenges before, but this confrontation, public and threatening, demanded a new level of composure. She realized that her reaction could influence not just her own safety, but also the dynamics around them. If she remained calm and steady, it might inspire someone else in the crowd to intervene or at least discourage further aggression. The biker, noticing the shift, seemed slightly unsettled. His confidence wavered as he tried to predict her next move. The smirk returned, but now there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The other bikers shifted subtly, sensing a change in the mood yet still silent, their support implicit but cautious. The power he had relied on was now being questioned, and the crowd could sense it too. She adjusted her bag, keeping her stance balanced, aware of every movement around her. The biker continued to speak, his words sharp and mocking, but the girl met each one with calm defiance. Her voice when she spoke was measured and steady, a quiet force that refused to be intimidated. She realized that her silence had been part of the strategy, but her controlled words now reinforced her presence. The street felt smaller, the surrounding noise fading into the background. This confrontation was no longer just a passing moment. It was a test of character, courage, and self-control. She could feel the eyes of pedestrians, some whispering, some observing silently, all witnesses to the struggle unfolding. The tension hung in the air, heavy and charged, each heartbeat echoing the unspoken challenge between them. The biker raised his phone higher, trying to capture her reaction, but she refused to give him the image he sought. She stared back at him, calm and unyielding, signaling that she would not be broken by his arrogance. The other bikers exchanged glances, sensing that their leader's performance was losing its expected effect. The young woman's quiet determination had disrupted the balance of power, showing that courage could exist even in a vulnerable moment. Every small gesture mattered. Her posture, her breathing, her steady gaze, each element communicated strength without aggression. The biker realized, perhaps for the first time, that fear was not always visible, and that quiet confidence could be more disarming than any loud confrontation. The moment stretched on, tense but revealing, each second emphasizing the clash between arrogance and resilience. The girl knew she could not predict what would happen next, but she could control her own actions. She remained alert, ready to move if necessary, but unwilling to let fear dictate her behavior. The bikers' attempts at intimidation continued, but they were losing their power, their effect diminished by her calm resolve. The city continued around them, but in this small space a different kind of rhythm prevailed. A rhythm of courage, patience, and quiet resistance. She felt a strange sense of clarity. Despite the fear, despite the public nature of the confrontation, she understood her own strength in a way she had not before. She could not control the biker's actions, but she could control her own, and that control gave her a sense of power she had not anticipated. Each measured breath, each deliberate stance was a step toward safety, toward reclaiming the space that had been threatened. The biker, sensing the shift, faltered slightly. His smirk remained, but there was a tension beneath it now, a small acknowledgement that he had miscalculated. The other bikers shifted subtly, unsure how to proceed, their silent support wavering in the face of unexpected resistance. The young woman remained steady, aware of the subtle changes in posture, in tone, in movement, understanding that her courage was affecting the entire dynamic. Time seemed suspended, the moment heavy with possibility. The girl's heart raced, but her mind was clear, focused on every detail, every potential outcome. She knew that this confrontation would end one way or another, and she was determined to ensure it ended without harm. The street, full of life moments before, had become a stage where courage, intimidation, and human will played out in quiet, intense conflict. And in that tension, she discovered something important, that facing fear with calm, the young woman's eyes were fixed on the biker, her heartbeat steadying slightly. As she realized she could endure his mockery without losing control, she remained composed, yet every nerve in her body was alert. She knew the tension could escalate at any moment, and she braced herself, not just physically but mentally, for whatever might happen next. The biker, sensing that his intimidation was no longer fully effective, leaned slightly forward, trying to regain his dominance. But just as he was about to speak, a new presence entered the scene. From across the street, a man noticed the situation unfolding. He was unassuming at first glance, wearing simple clothing, carrying a bag slung over his shoulder. His pace slowed as he approached, a calmness in his movements that contrasted with the chaotic energy of the biker. He observed quietly, taking in the scene with a keen awareness. There was no aggression in his posture, yet his presence immediately commanded attention, a subtle signal that he was about to intervene. The biker, focused on the young woman, did not notice him at first. The man stepped onto the sidewalk, closing the distance without rushing. His eyes met the biker's briefly, not with fear but with a quiet, unwavering certainty. The biker's smirk flickered for a moment as he sensed someone new entering the equation, someone who did not appear intimidated by his show of bravado. The other bikers shifted slightly, confused by the new energy in the air, unsure how to react. The man positioned himself carefully, standing between the biker and the young woman. He did not shout, did not make any dramatic gestures. He simply stood there, calm, grounded, with a presence that seemed to grow quietly but steadily. The young woman felt a mix of relief and surprise, sensing that she was no longer entirely alone. The biker, however, seemed unsettled. He had expected submission or fear, but this newcomer did not offer either. "Move aside," the biker said, attempting to regain control. His voice was loud, meant to intimidate. He leaned slightly toward the man, expecting resistance. But the man did not flinch, did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the biker calmly, his expression neutral but firm. "You don't need to do this," the man said. His voice was soft, but every word carried weight. There was no threat, only a clear message. "This behavior is unacceptable." The biker laughed, dismissing the words as if they were insignificant. He took a step closer, leaning on his bike, trying to assert his dominance. But the man remained still, his eyes steady, unblinking, unafraid. The young woman watched in awe as the dynamic shifted subtly but unmistakably. The biker's confidence wavered, his arrogance now facing an unexpected challenge. The other bikers behind him exchanged glances, their silent support now tinged with uncertainty. The presence of this one calm individual standing firmly had disrupted the power the biker thought he held. The man continued speaking, his tone even, controlled, yet unmistakably commanding. "There's no need to humiliate anyone. There's no gain in cruelty. You don't have to be this way." Each word seemed to chip away at the biker's facade. His smirk remained, but now there was hesitation, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The biker tried to laugh it off, attempting to mask his uncertainty with bravado. He nudged his bike slightly, revving the engine, hoping to intimidate once more. But the man's calm presence absorbed the aggression rather than responding to it. He did not match the biker's energy. Instead, he grounded himself in stillness, making it clear that intimidation would not succeed here. The young woman, feeling the shift in energy, felt a renewed sense of safety. Her heart was still pounding, but the tension around her had softened slightly. She could see the biker's frustration growing. He had expected fear and submission, but instead he faced composure and quiet authority. The crowd nearby began to sense the change as well. A few people whispered, some watched more closely, feeling a subtle relief as the situation seemed less threatening. The biker spoke again, attempting to regain control with words meant to belittle the young woman, but the man's calm response interrupted him. "It's not about you proving anything. Treating others with respect is the real strength." The words were simple, yet they carried undeniable power. The biker's eyes flicked around, noticing the crowd forming a subtle perimeter. Some onlookers had stepped closer, emboldened by the man's courage, signaling silently that the arrogance would not go unchecked. The biker's friends shifted uneasily. They had supported him because he appeared dominant and in control. But now his dominance was being questioned. The man standing there quietly had changed the dynamic, showing that courage and calm could dismantle aggression without confrontation. The biker's smirk faltered, a small sign that his strategy was losing its effectiveness. The young woman still standing behind the man felt a mixture of awe and relief. She realized that this person had appeared at just the right moment, not with anger but with presence and clarity. The biker, for the first time, had to confront the fact that his arrogance might not yield the reaction he expected. He attempted to assert himself verbally, making a sharp comment aimed at challenging the man, but the response was measured, calm, and firm. "There's no need for this. You don't have to prove anything through cruelty." The words landed with quiet authority, shifting the energy in the space between them. The other bikers glanced at each other, uncertain how to react. The arrogance that had seemed untouchable now appeared fragile. The crowd began to react subtly. Some people nodded. Some whispered encouragement, and a few stepped a little closer, sensing that the situation was being managed. The biker's initial confidence was now tinged with doubt. He shifted on his bike, uncertain how to proceed. His mocking laughter lost some of its conviction, and the smirk on his face flickered with unease. The young woman felt her own courage rising slightly, buoyed by the presence of someone willing to intervene calmly and firmly. The man's posture remained relaxed but attentive, ready to respond if the biker escalated further. He did not shout, did not move aggressively, but his presence alone was enough to challenge the biker's dominance. The quiet authority he displayed created a ripple effect, altering the behavior of the biker, his friends, and even the surrounding crowd. The biker, realizing that his usual tactics were failing, attempted a final show of arrogance. He revved his engine again, louder this time, trying to intimidate with sound and motion, but the man did not flinch. His calm gaze met the biker's, unwavering and unshaken. The young woman standing just behind felt a sense of reassurance. The tension remained, but now it was balanced, controlled, and the biker no longer held the absolute power he had assumed. Moments passed, each filled with a subtle power struggle. The biker tried to regain control with words and gestures, but the man's quiet presence deflected each attempt. The young woman began to realize that sometimes confrontation did not require shouting, anger, or aggression. Sometimes calm determination and presence could be more powerful than any show of force. The biker's friends exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the shift. The arrogance that had carried him this far now seemed fragile and uncertain. The man's calm authority had quietly but decisively challenged the dominance that had appeared untouchable moments before. Finally, the biker took a step back. His smirk remained, but the confidence behind it had faltered. He muttered something under his breath, frustration evident, yet he no longer seemed certain of his power. The other bikers adjusted their positions, no longer as assured as before, and the young woman felt a deep sense of relief. The man did not celebrate, did not boast. He simply remained calm, allowing the biker to see that aggression could be met with composure rather than fear. The young woman, now standing more relaxed behind him, felt gratitude and admiration for the quiet hero who had arrived at just the right moment. The street's rhythm began to return, the crowd slowly dispersing, and the hum of the city filled the space once more. For the young woman, the encounter had been transformative. She had faced fear, intimidation, and the potential for humiliation, yet she had not been alone. The unexpected hero's calm presence had changed the course of events, showing her that courage could manifest in quiet ways, without aggression, without spectacle. The biker, confronted with a force he could not intimidate, had no choice but to step back. A lesson in humility etched into the tension-filled minutes of the encounter. As the man stepped slightly aside, allowing her to move forward safely, the young woman realized that heroes often appear when least expected. They do not always wear uniforms or make grand gestures. Sometimes they are simply people willing to stand firmly and calmly in the face of cruelty, altering the balance of power without raising their voice. The young woman continued her walk, her pace slower now, her mind still processing the encounter. The city street returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of that moment lingered. She had witnessed arrogance challenged not with force but with presence, and it had made all the difference. The encounter left her with a renewed sense of courage and a deeper understanding that kindness, calmness, and quiet strength could sometimes achieve what confrontation alone could not. The biker's smirk had faded, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that their leader's usual confidence had cracked. The young woman, standing slightly behind the quiet man who had intervened, felt the tension in the air slowly shift. The biker was still large, still imposing, but his arrogance was no longer unshakable. Every subtle movement of the man before him reminded him that intimidation could fail, that not all power came from size or loudness. The biker leaned forward slightly, attempting to regain control with words sharp and mocking. "You think you can tell me what to do?" he sneered. His voice was loud, meant to provoke fear and submission, but the man remained calm, grounded, unflinching. His gaze was steady, direct, yet without aggression. "It's not about telling anyone what to do," he said evenly. "It's about treating people with respect. You don't gain strength by hurting others." For a moment, the biker was silent. The words cut through the posturing, revealing the emptiness behind his arrogance. He had expected submission, an easy display of fear, but instead he faced calm authority. His friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to challenge the stranger or retreat. The young woman felt a sense of relief and newfound courage. She could see that the situation was changing, that the balance of power had shifted. The biker tried to laugh it off, attempting to hide the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He nudged his bike slightly, revving the engine louder this time, hoping to assert dominance through sound and motion. But the man did not react to the display. He stood calmly, eyes steady, letting the biker's performance reveal itself for what it was: bravado without substance. The other bikers sensed the shift too, noticing that the leader's usual power over them was now uncertain. The young woman felt her heart pounding, but she focused on remaining steady, breathing evenly. She realized that her composure, along with the man's intervention, had created a kind of shield. The biker's arrogance had been challenged, and the tension was now a delicate balance between intimidation and restraint. The crowd nearby sensed the change. Some whispered softly, others watched more closely, feeling the subtle shift in authority. "Why do you do this?" the man asked, his voice calm and measured. "Why try to intimidate someone smaller, someone alone? It doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make you better." His words were simple, but the conviction behind them was undeniable. The biker's eyes narrowed slightly, as if questioning the meaning, the truth in the statement. His friends murmured among themselves, sensing the vulnerability that had appeared in their leader's confidence. The biker tried to respond with a taunt, but it lacked the usual conviction. He had expected fear, submission, perhaps even silence, but instead he faced reason and steady courage. His posture tensed as he realized that he no longer controlled the situation. The young woman standing behind the man felt a strange mix of awe and reassurance. The arrogance that had seemed untouchable moments ago was now being dismantled quietly, firmly, and without aggression. The biker shifted uneasily on his bike. He had relied on public intimidation to maintain his sense of superiority, but now the reality was clear. His strategy had failed. The quiet man's presence, combined with his calm words, had undermined the biker's confidence in a way that loud words or threats never could. The other bikers sensed it too, glancing at one another with uncertainty. The dynamic that had seemed predictable moments ago had changed completely. The man continued speaking, each word deliberate and steady. "Strength isn't measured by how much you scare people. True strength is in how you treat others, in how you respond when no one is watching." The biker's face hardened for a moment, but he could not maintain the facade he had relied on for so long. The smirk returned briefly, but it was forced, lacking conviction. The young woman noticed it immediately, recognizing the first signs of real hesitation. The crowd sensed the tension. A few pedestrians had moved closer, encouraged by the calm authority the man displayed. Their presence added another layer of subtle pressure on the biker, signaling silently that the cruelty would not go unchecked. The biker's friends fidgeted, some shifting from foot to foot, unsure how to respond. Their silent support had once emboldened him, but now it seemed fragile, uncertain. The biker tried to regain control verbally, making a sharp comment meant to belittle the young woman. But the man interrupted gently, his calm tone firm. "There's no need to humiliate her. That doesn't make you stronger, it only shows weakness." The biker's eyes flickered, and for the first time the smirk faltered. His friends exchanged looks, sensing the imbalance in authority. The young woman felt a wave of relief, knowing that the situation was moving toward resolution without escalation. The biker leaned on his bike, revving the engine once more, a final attempt at bravado. But the man did not respond to noise with noise, presence with presence. He remained calm, eyes steady, his authority quiet but undeniable. The biker's arrogance was crumbling in the face of composure and reason. The young woman felt her own strength return, realizing that courage was often quiet, often subtle, but no less effective. Minutes passed in this tense but controlled atmosphere. The biker's attempts at intimidation grew weaker, his words less sharp, his gestures less assured. The young woman noticed how his friends had begun to retreat slightly, no longer as confident in supporting him. The man's calm authority had created a ripple effect, changing the energy in the space, shifting the balance in favor of reason and restraint. The biker finally muttered something under his breath, frustration clear in his tone. He glanced around, realizing that his arrogance had failed, that the quiet man's presence had removed the power he had assumed. He adjusted his posture, his confidence diminished, and his friends followed suit, sensing the same shift. The young woman breathed a quiet sigh of relief, understanding that the confrontation had been contained through calm, thoughtful intervention rather than aggression. The man stepped slightly forward, reinforcing his position without threat. "You don't need to do this. Step back and let people walk in peace," he said. His words were simple, clear, and firm. The biker, now visibly frustrated and uncertain, took a step back. The young woman felt a surge of gratitude and respect for the quiet hero who had intervened. His courage was not loud or dramatic, but it was far more effective than anything the biker had attempted. The other bikers murmured among themselves, realizing that their leader's usual dominance was no longer absolute. The young woman noticed the subtle signs of humility and hesitation in the once arrogant biker. He had learned in a short but intense encounter that cruelty and intimidation were not reliable means of control. The crowd, sensing the change, relaxed slightly, some nodding in quiet approval, others whispering about the unusual confrontation they had witnessed. The young woman felt her own confidence return as she stepped forward slightly, staying close to the quiet man. She realized that courage could appear in unexpected ways and that standing firm, even in the face of intimidation, could change the outcome. The biker's arrogance had been stopped, not with confrontation alone, but through composure, reason, and quiet authority. The biker muttered something inaudible and finally stepped back, the smirk now replaced with a hesitant expression. His friends followed, uncertain, sensing that the moment for intimidation had passed. The quiet man allowed the space to clear, maintaining his calm presence while ensuring the young woman could move safely. The crowd began to disperse slowly, the hum of the city returning as the tension eased. The young woman walked carefully, glancing at the biker one last time. He remained on his bike, but his arrogance had been tempered, his confidence shaken by the quiet intervention that had refused to rise to his level of cruelty. She felt a profound sense of relief and admiration for the man who had stepped in without aggression, using presence and reason to halt the cruelty. As she continued down the street, she realized that the encounter had been transformative. She had faced fear and intimidation, yet she had not been alone. The quiet hero had shown her that courage could be calm, strong, and effective even against overwhelming arrogance. The biker, confronted with the consequences of his behavior, had no choice but to step back, learning a silent lesson in humility.